Okay, so I'm going to assume that this is now live. What I'll do is I'll keep this open a second and wait, and then I will jump straight into it. Again, given the issues I've had with TradingView recently, I will wait a couple of seconds and then I'll record this on OBS as well. So worst case, I'll try to stick this up on YouTube as well later and then put the link back in the chat. Okay, so obviously quick Bitcoin update. There's a couple of things that I guess we've been talking about for quite some time now. I think we're still in this bearish move as a whole. I think what I'll do is um, I'll bring up this and see if you can see this. So in terms of where we are, I'm going to stick this behind. I'm going to stick this in front, and I'm going to look at a behind the scenes on. So I'll go back to the daily. So on the daily time frame, I think this is the question that I've had the most quite recently. You can see what's happening behind from the original posts and the distribution moves. If I can line this up just a little bit, there we go. Where are we to? And this was distribution 2, so I need distribution 1. Let me go back up 1, distribution 1. So what we were looking at was the 3 peaks basically. So first one, second one, and third one. And what you'll notice, if you can see behind, is you've actually got two. Let's just put these as horizontal lines. You've got two horizontal lines, basically at the AR and the other at the SOW. And if you can see what's actually happened in this, when we had the move back up from this low, you'll see that this formed a nice little rising channel and then ultimately dropped down. And what you'll notice is within the schematic, this last move, this last point of supply, was actually around the 50% marker of the whole schematic. So if I come back to just the basic chart, what we were seeing was the drop from the 50% down and through. In Wyckoff terms alone, you'd anticipate the drop to be from the LPSY coming back and creating basically another type of LPSY move, which is what I'm seeing here. Now, this is all pure Wyckoff based, and I think when you combine this with the Elliott moves, let me get rid of some of these. When you combine this with the Elliott moves as well, then I think what I'm looking at is still the 3 high, which was ultimately the weekly for me. At the moment, it's irrelevant whether it's weekly or monthly. It's still the fact that we are kind of counter trend currently. We've actually had an A move down, a B move back, continuing with a C move down. And then I think because of this particular point here was touching back on the underside, so we put these back on roughly. So the sign of weakness and what I would regard as the AR. Then we literally come back the next day, tested this, and after that we've had a couple of failed attempts, this one being the first one, this one being the second one. Now, you could argue that we're actually seeing lower highs, and obviously at the moment we're actually seeing higher lows as well. So we've got, a nice little triangle pattern, if people want to call it that. I think for me, I'm not that fussed on that one. I think that there's a couple of other things that give this away. And I think because we actually sat within this range at the moment, there's actually a couple more key points at this. So what I'd like to do is to step down. Let's get out of these and let's come back into a small. Just check on the questions a second. Okay, I think so far perfect. So I guess in terms of the actual range, what I'd like to do is draw the box firstly where I see most of the activity. So I think the activity for me is sitting there to there, and therefore we've got a nice little range currently. I think this is what I would look at in terms of a kind of value area. So I'll see if I can kind of hone in a little bit more on this. Let's step that up a little bit more. I think we could probably come down a little bit lower again. So I'm going to make the assumption that we are here. I'm probably going to go to the 50% marker there. So I think for me, the value area realistically is probably sitting somewhere around the 36.5, what 36.9 kind of level. And therefore, I think that for me is the current value area. We're going to get a couple of tests and so on of this. Let me just check with the range as well. Let's come into the volume profile. Let's go to fixed ranged, and then we're going to try from the absolute low, come back to obviously the high, and I'm going to drag this out to the end. Yeah, and therefore we're not far away in terms of the point of control. We've got a nice little value area, which will probably take you back to the drop box that I've just drawn, sitting in obviously the highlighted candles in the lighter colors around this kind of region. So I think for me, that's pretty much what I'm seeing. Anything underneath that is actually a fair value in terms of institutional investors. Anything above that, I would actually regard as expensive. And therefore, if we are sitting in some kind of accumulation, then I think this is the kind of initial point that I'm actually interested in. So I think that's kind of the first real look at this.